Hi guys, it's Ali. Welcome back to my channel. So for this video, I'm bringing you 3 more techniques you can do with layering stencils to make really pretty backgrounds for your cards. If you want even more ideas, there's also another video on my channel with more techniques for layering stencils. The stencil set I'm using in this video is from AliExpress. It's this really pretty heart pattern. I've just written numbers on my stencils so I don't get confused. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you do, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos just like this one. Let's get into the techniques. Let's get cracking. This is going to be a long one, so I hope you guys have got a cup of tea. I definitely have. The first card we're going to make, we're going to do a bit of heat embossing. So I've just got some plain white stamping card, and I'm using the first layer of my stencil along with my Versamark ink. I'm just pressing that through the stencil, so I've got a nice sticky bit underneath each of the spots in the stencil. It's kind of hard to see on camera. And then I'm going to use some Wow embossing powder. I'm using it ultra high metallic silver embossing powder for this. Ultra high embossing powder can be a little bit hard to work with, and it doesn't give you the cleanest results. If you wanted a super clean embossing, I would recommend you just use the regular silver embossing powder, but I wanted to go for something like a little bit more grungy and abstract for this one. When you're using ultra high embossing powder, you want to make sure not to bring the heat gun too close to your card because it will blow the embossing powder off. So you can either heat it from the back first to start melting it, or you can just hold the heat gun a little bit further away. The pressure of the heat will fling the bits of embossing powder off the paper if you hold it too close, but if you just hold it, you know, a couple of inches away from your card, 2 to 3 inches, I would say, you will be absolutely fine, and most of the embossing powder will stay on the card. So this kind of embossing powder is like a really chunky finish, and it kind of looks a little bit like mercury to me, this sort of finish. I really like it, and it's come out really, really nicely on this card. It's not come out perfectly, but you know what, that's okay. It doesn't matter, it doesn't need to be perfect, it's handmade. We're on to the second level of the stencil now. The reason I chose to do the embossing first on this card is because I wanted to use dye inks, and then I didn't have to worry about them drying before I did the embossing. So that's why I started with the embossing. You don't have to start with that if you don't want to. I'm using Memento Dewdrop inks on this card. The first colour I've used is Angel Pink, which is this really pretty, it's supposed to be baby pink colour, but I would say it's come out a little bit more peachy on this card, but I really like it anyway. And then the second colour I'm going to use is Summer Sky. Really like these inks. If you want to try building up your collection of inks for crafting but you don't want to spend a lot of money, these are really, really great option because you can usually get them for about £1 or £2 each. They're available on Amazon, eBay and lots of other stores as well. I think Hunky Dory stock them on their website, and I really, really recommend them. I've got them in a bunch of different colours, and I think I've nearly got all of the colours, and I haven't had one that's disappointed me. So yeah, they're really, really good if you're in the UK, because I think it's harder to get some of the other dye ink brands in the UK, or they end up being like mega expensive. I'd really like to try like the Gina K ones, but they're much more expensive to get hold of than these, so I've stuck with these for now to learn the techniques before I move on to something a little bit more expensive. So now we're going to top this background with a die cut. I've just gone with craft cardstock for this one so it can match the card base that I'm going to use, and I've cut this die out 3 times from craft cardstock, and I'm going to glue it together with my Ranger Multimedia Matte. I've just got this little bottle. It's much easier to use liquid glue when you're doing stuff like this, but I do find it really, really tedious. The only reason I do it is because it makes such a big difference to the final sentiment. It stops it getting lost on the card, so even though it's really frustrating, I still do it. Oscar's come for a little look while I'm doing that. He loves to get involved in my crafting and come and peek at what I'm doing on the desk. This die is from AliExpress. I featured it in my recent AliExpress haul if you watched that, and I always put all the links to all of those products in the description box of those videos. Everything I use in this video, I'll pop the link in the description box so I can find it for you as well, just so you can go and check it out if you want to. I really like this die, and it cut really nicely as well. Even though it's quite a fiddly die, the resulting pieces were quite strong, and they were even stronger once I'd obviously glued 3 layers together, so I'm glad I did do that. The last thing I need to do before I mount it on the card is add the sentiment. So I've just popped that on there with a little bit more Ranger Multimedia Matte, just so it sticks, because there's obviously quite a bumpy layer on this card with all of the embossing. And I'm going to use this little Crafter's Companion distressing tool just to like distress the edges of the cardstock. I thought to kind of match the distress look of the embossing, I thought this was a really nice way to tie it all together. There's basically like a little round thing with little blades inside, and you just rub it over the cardstock and it makes a roughed up edge. It's one of my favourite little tools that I always forget to use and feature in videos, but I really, really love it. It's like just adds something really nice and like an extra touch to your card just to kind of elevate it and give it that little bit of detail. So I'm just using some Sizzix foam tape there. That's my favourite thin foam tape at the moment. I've gone through like a roll and a half of it in the last couple of months. Luckily it's available on the work, so it's nice and cheap. And then I've mounted it on a craft 5x7 card. So that is the first finished card. That's a nice easy one to start with. I hope you like that one. I really like the colours on this. It sort of looks like grey and pink, but it is baby blue and pink, and I really think it's really nice and simple and a lovely card that people would love to receive. So the second card we're going to make, we're starting with some really pale grey cardstock. I know it looks white, but it's not. It's really pale grey, trust me. I wanted to use a coloured cardstock in this one because I'm going to use clear sparkle embossing powder on this. So again, we're starting with our Versamark, and that's the first layer of the stencil there. And then on top of that, I'm going to use Wow embossing clear sparkle, which I always forget to use, but it's really, really pretty. And it's really nice to use on coloured cardstock because where you emboss it, it just makes the cardstock look a little bit darker. So it's quite a nice one to have in your stash because it's a bit of a versatile one. You can use it on pretty much everything and get all kinds of different looks. The glitter in it is kind of like iridescent, so there's like little bits of blue and white in there, and I really like it. It's a really, really nice one. Just going to melt that again with my heat gun. Again, I've started with the embossing powder because I know that is going to dry then, and I'm not going to have problems later down the line with embossing powder sticking to other ink, especially because on this one I'm actually going to use a pigment ink and they take a long time to dry, so I'm going to end up having to leave this background to dry overnight anyway. That's the embossing powder all set and ready to go. And then for the second layer, I'm going to use dye ink again. This time I'm going to use grey flannel from Memento, which is like a mid-grey ink, and I'm blending that on with my blending brushes, which are actually makeup brushes that I got off Amazon. I'll link them in the description box. They're really, really good. If you struggle with the blending foam tools, which I'm not really a big fan of those unless I want to get like a really, really thick coverage of ink, I find these a little bit more versatile. And they're really easy to wash as well, so you don't have to have loads and loads for different colours. I do tend to wash mine, you know, every few projects just to make sure that I can use the lighter colours on them. So that's the second layer. I really, really like this grey and sparkle colour. My friend Emma actually inspired this. Hi Emma. I showed her the first card and she said, oh, I love the grey and pink, and it wasn't actually grey and pink, and I thought, you know what, that would be a really nice colour combination for the next card. So I'm using Versacolor pigment ink on this. I've got loads of these little inks, because when I first got into card making I started collecting all the ink colours. I didn't really know anything about ink at that point, so I was just looking for like, oh, what's a cheap one that's a good brand. So I've got a bunch of these Versacolor ones, to be honest, that I've not really used, so I thought I would put it to good use on this card. And it's actually a really, really nice pretty baby pink colour, and I think this is my favourite colour combination for all of the cards in this video. I just think it's so pretty and classy, and it's you know, even though it's pink, it's not particularly girly, so yeah, really like that. Now it's time for the die cut to go on top. I've picked this one from my stash, which I think is from AliExpress as well. It just says Happy Day, and I've cut it from some Tonic satin black mirror cardstock. Like, it's matte, but it's like a mirror. That doesn't make any sense, but I'll put the link to it in the description box if you want to go check it out. I love Tonic's cardstock, and I think I have like way too many of their packs. Eventually I think I'm going to replace most of my cardstock stash with stuff from Tonic, because I just really, really like it. They've got gorgeous colours. I couldn't really see the sentiment on top of the background because it was a little bit too busy, so I've used one of my favourite tricks when this happens and just got a strip of vellum, cut it to the right length, and then tucked the ends behind the card and taped them down. And this makes a really, really nice base for a sentiment on a busy background, because you can still see the background, but it makes your sentiment stand out a little bit more. And then all I need to do is just pop a little bit of liquid glue on the back of that sentiment and pop it on the front of my card, and it's finished off. This is a lovely simple one. I really, really like this. The only thing with this is you have to make sure that you've trimmed your background down to the right size before you put your vellum on, because then if you trim your card again, the vellum's just going to fall off, right? So I've made that mistake before, so don't do that. Now I'm just going to mount that on a white 5x7 card. Again, out comes the Sizzix foam tape, which is my favourite, and the non-stick scissors from Tonic, which are a godsend when it comes to foam tape. Oh my god, the amount of scissors I've ruined of foam tape is just doesn't bear thinking about. I'm just going to pop that on the front of the card, and that's that card done. Oh, apart from trimming it down a little bit just because I slightly misjudged the size. Really like that one. It's really pretty. I love the sparkle that catches the light. And I love that I decided to use a different colour to white as well. That really pale grey just looks really, really nice. And it reminds me of the Simon Says Stamp fog cardstock that everyone raves about. We don't get that in the UK, so I'll link to the one that I used in the description box. It's available on Craft Stash. So the last one, this is definitely my favourite technique. I'm going to call it a tie-dye technique, although I don't think that's really the best name for it. So if you have a better idea for what we should call this, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you guys would call it. All I'm using for this is my Distress Oxides in Squeezed Lemonade, Picked Raspberry and Seedless Preserves, and these little ink daubers. I'm sure loads of you have these ink daubers in your craft room. I've had them for ages and I'm like, what the hell do I use these for? They're not great for blending, but for this technique they're perfect. So what I'm basically doing is randomly dotting the colours across the stencil. I'm going to do each colour. I'm going to do all 3 colours on each layer. So I'm starting with the lightest colour and then going towards the darker ones. And I'm making sure to overlap the colours a little bit, because basically what I want it to look like when I've finished is that they're like random splodges of colour. So all of the hearts are like randomly tie-dyed, and I was really impressed. I just had this idea like, oh, I wonder if this would work, so I thought I'd give it a go, and turns out like it's great. I'm not gonna lie to you though, this did take a long time, because you're basically doing, you know, you're doing 3 layers of this, and you know it's not fast at all. So but it does make a really, really cool finished background, and I think people will be like, oh my god, how did you do that? So I'm trying to be quite random, and I'm trying to make sure that the colours are mixed up well. I'm trying to make sure there's at least 2 colours on each segment of each heart, just so, there you go, that just looks so pretty, doesn't it? I haven't blended them together with the blending foams, but there is a really nice texture that the blending foams give. It's sort of blended, but then it's sort of like spongy texture. You'll see it close up in a bit and you can decide for yourself. So now we're moving on to the second layer, and then we're going to start with the yellow again and go through the pink and the purple. And this time I'm looking through the stencil and trying to make sure that the colours are not lining up, so you know, yellow is next to yellow, pink is next to pink. I'm not worrying about it too much, so if there is a little bit of yellow on, you know, on a heart that also has yellow on it, like that's fine, but I'm trying to make sure that the whole heart isn't pink, for example, because that's kind of not the point of this technique. So I'm just trying to fill in the gaps on each layer of the stencil and make sure the colours are nicely mixed up. So the more blobs you put down, the easier it gets, because you can just like see the gaps and be like, oh, okay, well I need some purple there, I need pink on that one. You do get used to it, but it is a little bit fiddly at first, but I promise it's worth it. Just wait and see the result. So while I'm finishing this off, because we've got to do a whole nother layer, I'm going to show you the whole process, but I don't think I need to talk about it for the whole time, do I? I've got a little confession for you. So when I first got back into card making a couple of years ago, I obviously like joined all the Facebook groups, and I like go on them and listen to what people are saying. I'm a bit of a lurker, so I'm in most of the card making groups, but I don't really post that often. I didn't really understand like why everybody was so obsessed with like Tim Holtz products, like all the distress products and like all the new things he releases. Like he has loads of stamp sets, doesn't he? He does dyes, he does obviously the distress oxides and the inks and the sprays. I was like, why is everybody so into these? Like, I don't really understand it. They're expensive, they're not really that widely available. There's like a lot to collect. Like that is a big investment. And then like I started getting some and I was like, oh yeah, these are pretty good. And like now I am fully converted and I really understand it. The other week I watched like an entire Tim Holtz live demo, which was like 2 hours. And I was like, how did I watch that whole thing? How did I pay attention for that long? But honestly, if you haven't tried the distress oxides and the distress inks before, maybe you're put off because they're quite expensive, and they are quite expensive, but they're so versatile. There's so many different things you can do with them, different techniques you can try and different fun things to do. But the main thing I love about them is that all the colours go together. There's not 2 colours in the range that clash with each other. And I just find that so cool. They've put so much thought into how the colours work together and how the colour palettes work that, yeah, so that's my favourite thing. That's my hot tip about distress oxides and inks. And I've nearly got all of the inks. Haven't got all of the oxides yet. I've got many, many more to collect. Of course, as well, when it comes to ink pads, you don't have to collect every single colour. Like I have a bit of collector syndrome, so sometimes I have to have things in every colour, but I'm trying to like rein it in a little bit and only collect the ones that I want. But when it comes to distress inks and oxides, there is a part of me that just wants to get them all, because it doesn't matter how many I already have. I do a project and I think, oh, I could really do with like a warmer brown, and I don't have that. That's quite enough of waxing lyrical about distress oxides. Let's finish off this card. So I'm going to cut some hearts from vellum, just using some of my dies. These are stitched heart dies that I got off AliExpress. So just cut the 3 of different sizes, and then I'm using this XOXO die, which has got stitching detail as well. I'm cutting that from brown craft cardstock, again to match the card that I'm going to use, the card base, and I'm just going to trim my background down. So I actually like ripped the pattern a little bit, but we're going to cut that bit off so no one's going to know. And I also got some ink smudges on the edge, but I'd actually originally cut the panel much bigger than I needed it to be, so I just trimmed it down to 5.5 inches square, so it's going to have a nice border on the 6-inch square card that I'm going to use. And then I needed a sub sentiment, because like XOXO on its own kind of didn't really make a lot of sense, so I've got this one from another AliExpress stamp set, which says "I think you are pretty great," and it's like a really nice chunky font. So I'm just going to heat emboss that in white onto the craft cardstock, the piece I had left over from cutting the XOXO, and then I've got a nice like little balanced sentiment that kind of makes a little bit more sense. And it's quite fun. I thought, I don't really send like, you know, I don't send Valentine's cards, I don't send cards that are like, oh, I love you, because I'm not really that kind of person that says I love you to people. Like all my friends, I think they know, my friends know that I love them, but I'm not someone be like, oh, I love you. So this is a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, it's a little bit more my style. So I'm just heat embossing that now, and then I'm going to cut that out with the die. I wanted to use stitch detailing on this because all of the other die cuts on the card had it, but I didn't really have one that was the right size. So here's a little hack for you. Essentially, with a lot of stitch dies, you can cut it one way and then you can reline up the die with the stitching lines in the little grooves that you've already cut, and you can cut it like shorter or thinner than the actual die is. So if you look at this, you can't really tell that I cut it twice. It just looks like that is the size of the die. It's super clever. So yeah, definitely try that one out. I use that trick all the time. Last thing I'm going to do on this card is assemble this sentiment. So because it's vellum, I didn't want to put glue on the back of the vellum because you can see it through, and I always think that just makes it look like, when you can see the adhesive, I try and avoid that because I just think it, you know, it doesn't make your card look as nice. As that's the first thing I see when I look at a card. It's like, oh, I got some adhesive on it there, and I can see that. Oh, I find it really annoying. So what I'm going to do is just use a little bit of liquid adhesive to attach them all. And wherever things are attached, there's going to be a bit of craft cardstock. So obviously all the sentiment is fine because that's craft. And then the vellum hearts, they're all attached in some way to the craft cardstock. And then the adhesive is underneath the craft. So it kind of looks like they're all floating there. So I did a good job. But I did get glue everywhere, but you know, we got the hang of it in the end. I'm not the best person at using liquid glue, but sometimes you got to go for the liquid glue, and the matte one is good because you can't see it when it dries. So that's all assembled, and I was just going to mount it with a little bit of glue, but it just didn't look right. I really wanted to raise it up off the card, and it makes it a little bit more difficult when you're using vellum. But I've pulled out these foam squares, which are actually left over from the Violet Studio card making kit that I used in a previous video. And I've used up all the squares, and now I'm just using like the border on the foam squares. Like don't waste that bit because it's the same as all of the foam squares, and you can just cut it into longer pieces. So you can see that was like a real hodgepodge of sticking bits of foam on the back of it. But there we go, it's ready to go, and you can't see any of the adhesive from the front because it's all hidden behind the craft pieces. Last thing I'm going to do, I'm whacking out my ATG gun, which is like the best thing. My boyfriend bought it for me for Christmas, and it just makes it so easy to apply double-sided tape. I get why everyone raves about them now. And I'm just going to mount the panel on the card, and then I'm going to stick my sentiment on the front. So there we go, that is the card. And I think this card is my favourite because I really like the technique that I've used for the background, and I also really like the sentiment that I've made. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you like these techniques and you learned something new. If you try any of them out, I'd love to see your creations, so don't forget to tag me on Instagram or Twitter. My handle is @MetaBabyCow on both, and I also have all my social media links in the description box of all my videos if you want to go and follow me anywhere else. Don't forget to leave a comment and let me know what your favourite technique was, and before you leave, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. I post a new one every Sunday. Sunday. Don't forget to check out my tutorial playlist for lots more fun techniques you can try. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you back here on my channel again soon. Bye!